Nobody gets my humor.
I couldn't hear it. I was trying to figure out who said something.
I said, is my hair okay?
Oh, you did have like a pixelated look for a second when you were drinking your water bottle.
I'm going to start the broadcast.
Sweet.
Here you go.
Sweet. Is Terry able to join us as a panelist this time?
Oh. Absolutely she can. I will fix that right now.
I just...
You grabbed her.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes,
for your
course.
form.
Yes, Alan, it looks like, is here as well. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you. Wow, we're already up to 11 attendees. So thank you, everybody. Oh,
Password
yeah,
to
thank
me.
you, everybody who is joining us there as well.
The clock is the timer is the 11th guess.
Yeah. So we will be going through this agenda today, starting off with a simple review. There's sort of three main things on the agenda, three big work-related things. The emergent issue work plan at the chief and Sergeant Williams' requests. We will do first steps, starting to look at a specific set of policies, but I also wanted to offer this time for folks who have other concerns to bring them up so that we can get them on a future agenda once we have our new commissioners rolling on the commission. The prohibited camping reinforcement rollout we moved from last time to this time. It is currently my understanding that prohibited camping is not enforced unless there is some other crime or health issue going on. But it's also important to talk these things out ahead of time, because eventually when we do start reinforcing prohibited camping, we want to do so in a respectful way that works with the communities. And the third one, also bumped off from a couple of meetings ago, is the final review of the Canine policy. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments about the agenda? Sweet. Can I get a motion to accept the agenda then?
Sure, affirmative.
Except the agenda is...
Sweet. I've got Silver and Alan seconding. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Looks like it's unanimous. I myself, and any opposed, say nay. Sweet. All right, so next we need to review and approve the May and June meeting minutes, or notes rather. The official minutes are the video, but we had to skip last month's approval because we were a little bit overcrowded for time.
Move approval of minutes.
Second.
Do I have any discussion? Everybody in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed say nay. Sweet. It is unanimous approval of the minutes. Thank you all for reading them ahead of time. Now we'll move on to public and commissioner comments. If you are in the attendees, please raise your hand at any time. We'll probably be cutting the public comments off around 5:45. I know we're moving a little bit faster than we did last time, so make sure you raise your hand in Zoom if you can, and we will allow you to talk as we go. So first up, I have Rachel and then Danny. So I'm going to allow Rachel to talk now. So Rachel, you are still muted, but you are allowed to talk. There we go.
Hi.
Hey, so we'll have 1 minute at 15 seconds or so. I'll start waving frantically. And then when you're out of time, finish it up and we'll cut you off. We'll try to let you finish your sentence though.
Okay. Hi, commissioners. Thanks for being here today. I would just like to encourage the board to continue to work with City Council about having a community-run auditing board, considering the state of emergency we're in regarding COVID-19 and also national protests that are happening. We're seeing a lot of police brutality happening in neighboring cities. Portland currently was ranked #1 for the most police brutality of any city in the US. And so I think as a smaller city that has its fair share of history of police brutality, but not necessarily as recent or as extreme, it's so important for us to be working with the community to address these issues and specifically also address the sweeps that have been happening, which in my opinion, not only go against CDC guidelines, but are extremely unethical and being prompted by uncomfortable homeowners, not necessarily by like crime or a lack of safety from campers. That's all I have. Thanks so much. I'll yield my time.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next up, we will have Danny and then Jen, and those are the only folks I've got on the list currently. So if you do want to make public comment, please raise your hand. All right. Danny, you are still muted, but you can unmute yourself now.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Danny Huffsmith. Just like to say that I think that the commission should put off the enforcement of prohibited camping until there is at least a 1-month period of no new COVID cases in Lane County. I would also encourage the commission to create a mandate of at least 24 hours notice of the police to give to people who are camping in prohibited areas so that they can have enough time to clear the area. I also believe there needs to be more guidance and restrictions around when and how to use the canine dogs in policing in Eugene, as well as to get access to the raw data for demographics so that that data can be meaningful. And I believe my time is up, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. Next up, we will have Jen Smith. And after that, we'll have Tyler Stewart.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I was just a little confused by the statement earlier. I don't know if policy has changed recently because my understanding was that the Washington Jefferson Park, in which many people were camping, has been cleared recently, was swept, was cleared out. And I'm just asking, was the implication that everyone there was committing crimes beyond that of just sheltering in place and breaking camping regulations? So I would like to have some clarity on that. I would like to urge you to follow the CDC guidelines and not disperse encampments unless there's illegal conduct outside of camping. I'd like an explanation of why the Washington Jefferson Park was cleared. And I would like there to be outreach materials and camping guidelines, social service information. We need a place for these people to go and stay. We need a place where they can have pets, partners, possessions, 24-hour security, bathrooms, storage, hand washing stations, a large
Thank you,
number.
your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we will have Tyler and then Davey. Tyler, you are good to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Tyler Stewart, South Eugene, Ward 2. Just echoing everybody else's concerns about police enforcing of the in-house failure of the highest. It's one thing if an individual person is committing a serious crime. But being poor and houseless is is not a criminal act, and we cannot be using our police forces to criminalize the poor. If we're going to make the move, we need to have housing or a place that's safe, secure, healthy for them to go. And we just need reform and reconstruction.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up, we will have Davey, and then first name, last name.
David Jackson.
Hi, my name is Davey Jackson. I'm a property owner. This is my third time visiting the commission. I want to commend the commission and the EPD on being at the forefront of police reform and kind of give people a bit of a message of hope. We've been nation leading in the adoption of body cameras, in the use of civilian forces like Cahoots, and the development of a civilian review board. The rapid adoption of many of the 8 can't wait policy reforms have also shown Eugene's leadership. As the nation calls for a 21st century public policy and public safety model, I think that there are solutions that this commission can work on, which are going to keep response times low by matching the needs appropriate to the call which is being made. So I applaud the cooperation between Cahoots and between EPD.
10 seconds.
Thank you. And I look forward to the continued coverage and leadership that Eugene can display, because we've already got the platform to provide the data for the rest of the country to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have first name, last name. Can you unmute yourself and tell us what your name is?
Yeah, this is Braden. And I was calling because I feel like there's a fundamental ontological difference in terms of where I stand on the sweeps occurring. I don't really understand what land could possibly be used for better than either for the growing of food or the sheltering of people. And clearly lawn spaces are not being used for growing of food. So I don't see how we could make an argument that that space could be used any better than providing people with a place to shelter. I also think that it's a fundamental aspect of humanity that people are not separate from the land, and that to deny people access to land that is there and is able to support them is a denial of the fundamental humanity of these people in a way that it is particularly egregious based off of the violent way that a lot of these sweeps end up displacing these people and destroying some of the few possessions that they have. And I feel like there's just a fundamental misunderstanding between me and where some other people are coming from. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up, we have Nina, and then Taryn, and then that is
Sean.
Yes.
Wayne Martin is trying to get in. I don't know why he's not able to, but he'd like to speak as well. He's been just to the panelists.
There's a chat message from him.
Yes.
I will search for him in a second.
You need to raise your hand, Wayne.
Include him. Yes.
I don't think he even has access to the Zoom.
No worries. I'll include him in a second. But for now, we've got Nina and then Taryn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Nina Sabatka. I'm a Eugene resident. I'm here to speak that I want you to put off enforcement of prohibited camping until there's a 1-month period of no new COVID cases in Lane County, unless there's a serious health or safety concern at the campsite, and to create a mandate of at least 24 hours notice to let people who are camping know ahead of time, and to create more guidance and restrictions around the use of canines to do the sweeps. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next up, we have Taryn and then Wayne.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. My name is Taryn, and I have lived here in Eugene my entire life for 34 years. And I'd just like to say that I find it unacceptable and actually quite disgusting to see the police and city resources used to dismantle homeless camps right now during a worldwide pandemic while the COVID cases are rising. I would like to urge you to stop this practice right away. Unless you can give these people a place to go, this has to stop. These individuals have almost nothing, and today I watched bulldozers destroy those things. So I just think that there has to be something better that we can do for people, especially when many are on the edge of being homeless right now. That's all.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up, we have Wayne. Wayne, you are muted still. Let me. There we go.
How about now?
We can hear you
Good.
now.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I didn't know I would be speaking with so many other people that had the same concern. A large number of people on the police force know who I am because I show up at these camps. And it's kind of something I've taken on in my retirement. I knew the people at the camp at 13th and 14th Streets quite well, and 2 days ago was Tuesday. I wanted to suggest a whole new revisitation on the commission's part to not using police officers as the people who are sent to the site, but to find outreach workers that are hired by the city or other social workers to go and begin talking to the people that have to collect all their belongings. And so that's, it was a very difficult experience for me. I don't blame the police, but you can do better than this. You have to sit down with the chief, and he's already heard from me on this subject. So I wish you well as a commission, and I hope you'll honor.
Thank you so much for your comments. That is the end of our public comments, and we're past 5:45. So let's move on to commissioner comments. Matt, if you would like to start. And then after that, we'll have Will Davey.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I'll keep my comments brief. I wanted to say I was encouraged by the Eugene Police Department's communication recently, using social media to talk about the accountability practices they've gone through and outlining that for the city in a public manner. I thought that was very transparent, and wanted to bring that to attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. We've got Will and then Silver.
Thanks. Nothing to say today. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Silver and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I have a question. Are we able to put forward an advisement or some sort of a policy that we don't stop, or that we stop the sweeps at this point? As a commission, able to somehow make it so that these people are safe? Because I understand the concern. There's, at this point in time when cases are, coming up again, COVID, it doesn't seem like it's the right point in time for us to start putting our homeless community, our unhoused community back on the streets. So I don't know if that's something that the council can afford to do, if we can open up those camps that we had again. But I agree, and I echo that with many of the callers, that it's not the right time.
Thank you so much for your comments, Jennifer, and then Terry. And I'll answer your question when I get around to mine.
Thank you.
I don't have a comment at this time. I just wanted to thank the speakers who took the time to come and talk to us.
Sweet. Terry and then Alan.
The only comment, since this is my last meeting, is I'm very, very much encouraged by the breadth and depth of the applications that we have received to be future members of the commission. I'm also encouraged by how many community members are becoming much more active. This is much more active than I've seen in the almost 5 years I've been here. So it makes me feel like I'm leaving things in with everybody concerned, and I'm very hopeful about the future for Eugene in that case. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. Alan, and then Lindsay.
No comments, but I would like to thank all the folks that came and testified today. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Thanks, Alan. Lindsay, and then V.
So thank you all for coming. And I would echo what Terry said. I was also really encouraged by the number of applicants, and thank you all for coming and making public comment. I'm the liaison to the Civilian Review Board, so I'll give you a brief update. Our meeting falls directly after your meeting this month, so we will be meeting on the 14th of July, next Tuesday. So if anybody is interested in coming, making public comment, and observing that part of the police oversight and accountability that Eugene has, that meeting will be held next Tuesday evening. In the meantime, 2 subcommittees of the Civilian Review Board have met, one to look at our bylaws and our organizing ordinance, and the other to look at like meeting practices. And we'll be bringing forward recommendations for changes at our next meeting on Tuesday for the full board to discuss. I would also draw attention to the public updates that the auditor's office has been making about the police response to the protests in the latter part of May. Those have been designated by the CRB as a community impact case, and so we're following that closely and looking forward to reviewing those full investigations when they're completed and we're allowed to review them. Let me look. The only other thing I would say, just in case for people who don't understand the difference between the Police Commission and the Civilian Review Board, Police Commission looks at police policy. Civilian Review Board looks at specific allegations of police misconduct and complaints, and then reviews the work of the auditor's office in terms to provide more transparency for the public and how that process works. So that's all that I had. My only other question would be, you can see for the minutes that were in the packet that we approved, not from last month, but the previous meeting, I had the same questions as some people have asked during the public comment today regarding, I would like, if it's possible, to hear more clarity on the enforcement of the camping ban, when that went back into place, what kind of notification was made, just because it's not clear to me. And I'm curious to hear how dogs were used in the clearing of the camps. I hadn't heard that before the public comment, and so I would be curious to hear how dogs have been used in the clearing of the encampments. My final comment would be to thank Chief Skinner and EPD for banning the carotid hold. I appreciate the process of moving it from into the category of being only when lethal force is allowed and then removing it entirely. I think that is an important first step and one of many that we can take together to realign community expectations with practices. So thank you for that change. And that's all.
Sweet. Thanks, Lindsay. V, and then myself.
Hi. I'm also very encouraged, like Terry, to see the turnout at the last meeting and at this meeting. I hope that that we're all coming together with the public here, and unfortunately, is under the circumstance of what's going around in the news in the event of our nations, and I hope that if we were to arrive at a point where we can, and I'm hoping that we can find a way to work with the public and to get to a solution. I hope that the participation doesn't stop there. I hope that we continue to have you come and join us at our meeting and give us inputs on how we can do our job better. And reflect the needs and the values of the community. The subcommittee that I'm a part of right now, we're reviewing the applications and we're seeing a lot And we're not just seeing applications from one specific ethnic group. We're seeing a very diverse, pool of applicants, and that's very encouraging as well. So I want to thank everyone who applied in advance. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you, V. So for my own comments, thank you everybody who's come to give public comment. Thank you to everybody who applied. I hope you all stay involved, whether or not we can appoint you to this particular commission. I'd also, to answer Silver's question, I think it would be appropriate to make a motion to recommend something at the end of the prohibited camping reinforcement rollout. Whether that's, go ahead, Jeremy.
Kyle Williams is asking to make a comment.
Okay, thank you. At the end of the camping enforcement discussion, whether that's a recommendation to City Council or whether it's just to codify it with EPD, we can discuss at the time. But that is, after Lindsay's comments before, one of the reasons that it is an agenda item of its own to make sure we can have that discussion openly and transparently. And then, yeah, next, Kyle, you are up.
Yeah, hi, sorry about the late response, and I'm having some technical difficulties. I appreciate everybody being here as always, and it feels a little awkward to be so disconnected. I'm just called in by phone at this point. I can't get through otherwise. Looking forward to talking about the policy we have on, but I'm gonna also need a little bit of help from you guys to help me walk through it a bit because my technology on my end isn't working appropriately. So thank you all, and I'll be here just listening in the background. If there's any questions, whatever I can answer as we go through the evening, just let me know.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Yeah, so next up on the agenda is, I gotta jump around here, is going to be the Chief's report. And then the emergent issue work plan. All right, Chief, you are still muted, and I will be right back while I mute my door.
Hey, good evening to everybody. I'm sequestered into my closet because I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and those of you that are still raising kids know exactly what I'm talking about when you get stuffed in the closet to do your Zoom meetings. I always enjoy listening to public comment and commissioner comments because I often find myself thinking about what do I want to share with commission this month, and oftentimes things come up that give me an opportunity to either give some clarity or answer some questions, so you don't have to wait as long as maybe you would for staff to answer questions. So I'm going to try and do that a little bit throughout this. So I'm going to try and go through some thoughts real quickly. First off, just extend some gratitude to the commission on leaning in on these tough topics. It'd be easy to identify or hope that somebody else is going to do this tough work, but I just was having a meeting today with staff, and I just reiterated with them that I'll share with you is that if there was ever a moment we were meant to be in this particular place doing this work, this is the moment. This is what it feels like for those of us that have been doing this for 30 years and thinking about what the end of their career looks like. This is what running through the finish line feels like for my profession. And so I'm happy to be here and happy to be engaged in this dialogue and seeing if we can do some things differently. And I shared those sentiments today with staff, and I shared those sentiments this morning with the legislature as I testified in front of representatives and senators that are on a subcommittee for police accountability and use of force reform. And so that was part of my day-to-day, being asked to be a part of that. I've been asked to be a part of a lot of stuff lately, and some of that is to do with who we are in Eugene and how far we've come and the reforms that we've already seen, which I think you can all be very proud of. The other piece of that is some of the partnerships we've developed, specifically Cahoots, and how that has worked, and really how that is such a strong relationship, and how we need to be able to rely on one another to be able to accomplish the needs of our community. And so I've been able to speak to what our role is in that and how Cahoots kind of pull back the curtain a little bit to show people how Cahoots actually works with respect to how they get dispatched and how they go to calls and how they work with, on our police radio and with vans that we purchase, and all of the little details that everybody wants to do. But I think that one of the citizens that gave comments hit the nail on the head, and I would tell you that what I'm solely focused on now with regard to police reform, well, not solely focused. What I'm focused on quite a bit right now around police reform is matching the response with the need in our community, and recognizing that a police response isn't always the correct response for some of the needs we see. And so we're going to be working on that. We're actually, right before this meeting, I spent an hour talking to crime analysts and people that are way smarter than I am about data to start building some analytics around what the need actually is. And we first have to define what the various needs are. And some of those are really obvious, and others are a little bit more nuanced, and we need to identify what those needs are so that we can actually say, okay, what's the correct response to that particular need, and start building that capacity. One of those things that we're moving towards, and Wayne, Pastor Martin was on, and Wayne and I have talked a lot, and so this isn't going to be a shock to him that I'm about ready to say this, but what I'm envisioning is for the Eugene Police Department to never respond to another homeless camp complaint ever again. And quite honestly, I know that we've been on the forefront of that, and I know that that often sticks to us as being the responding agency, but many people don't know that right now Parks and Open Space is actually taking the lead on camping, and some people call them sweeps, other people call them clearings, but Parks and Open Space through the city is doing that. And while Eugene Police may be there, we're trying to take a backseat role to that and only be there as a supporting cast in the event that we have people that are refusing to leave when lawfully asked to, or there is any other dangerous types of situations. And so we're starting to distance ourselves from that and starting to move away from camping enforcement. And that's something that's very, very purposeful. To my knowledge, we've never used a canine with clearing camps or asking campers to leave. The only knowledge I have of a canine in the last month is when we had a robbery and a suspect that fled the robbery scene, and the dog tracked to one of the homeless camps, and we were trying to identify a violent felon that just fled a scene. But we are not using dogs for that. That is not a correct application for our dogs. That's not even remotely within policy or remotely within the national standards of canines and how we utilize them. So that doesn't happen. And in almost every case that I'm aware of, when we are actually clearing or asking people to leave, especially through Parks and Open Space, and especially the right-of-way clearances, there is 48 or 24 hours or more advance warning before we close any open space down to camping and ask campers to move on. So there's many of these things that are being called for that are already in place and that we're already doing. Now, there may be some one-offs where there's something that is so dangerous or so violent that we're actually going in and moving people sooner. But when we talk about closing of right-of-ways where Public Works is involved, those things are posted and people are oftentimes given ample warning before they're asked to move on. But I can't stress enough that EPD's role under my leadership is going to be to move away from just specifically camping enforcement and be more of a supporting role. And my goal here is to get police officers, our professional police officers, back to doing what police officers should be doing. And we can all think of those instances when people call 911 that you want a police officer to respond. And I've often been heard saying that as long as we as human beings coexist and live closely to each other, we also find a way not to be very good to each other. And that's unfortunate, but that's why a well-trained and professional law enforcement organization should exist, is to protect victims, to interdict crime, to prevent crime, to do good investigations where prosecution is appropriate. And we're going to really try and get our police officers back to doing what police officers should be doing. And that's both in our community and, quite honestly, in our schools as well. And understanding that there is a role for relationships between law enforcement professionals and kids that are well documented, that help build a strong, resilient learning environment for our kids. and we can do that a little bit differently, and we can do that more thoughtfully, and we're working on that right now. I just saw the first draft of a very comprehensive reform around the school resource officer program to move it to a youth services program that offers a lot of interaction. And what I'm deathly afraid of is creating an environment where the only time you see a police officer showing up on campus is when it's enforcement activity or arresting a kid or citing a kid. That is contrary to what we're trying to accomplish by rebuilding trust and legitimacy in this community with our law enforcement professionals. So we'll be working really, really hard on that as well. I invite you to tune in on June 20th to the council work session. It is 90 minutes of community safety initiative where I'll be speaking and talking about some things that are on my mind and some things that we're starting to see around police reform. I think we'll get some clarity from council around some of the task forces, or at least the concept around a task force to help inform that decision making. I certainly am committed to reforming this police department, being well informed by our community. I've always said I want to build a police department that mirrors our community and is advised by our community with respect to what looking better, what better looks and feels like, and what our community actually needs. And I'm encouraged that that would be our whole community. And so on July 20th, there'll be that 90 minutes, and I'm hoping that'll be really informational for commissioners and anybody else listening. Encourage you to listen in on that and give me an opportunity to just share some thoughts about what police reform looks like. So with that, I'm going to yield. Well, I probably went over my time, so I'm not yielding anything back to you, but I will go ahead and stop there. And as always, I'll be a part of the call for the rest of the evening, and we'll look forward to the end of the agenda where we get to recognize 4 of our commissioners for just some outstanding work they've done before they decide to go. And I can't tell you how pleased I am with the numbers of the recruitment around the open commissioner positions. Jeremy has been keeping me up to date on that, and now's the time to be a part of this really important kind of systemic change that we're about ready to embark on. And again, I can't say enough that if there was ever a moment that we need to lean in and really do this tough work, now's that moment. So thank you very much.
Sweet. Before you go, Chief, I had a question about the, you brought up the youth services transition for the SROs. Do you have any idea of what sort of timeline we might see some of those changes come here?
Well, first of all, we have to, first of all, what we have to do is we're trying to do a little bit of information gathering and information sharing with 4J School Board. They've got some decisions that they need to make, and I think there was a point in time where they wondered if they had as much information as they were hoping to have before making a good decision. And so we're pulling that together. We were already on this path before we even had this decision from the school board. We actually were in negotiation for a services-oriented contract with 4J that was outlining many of these changes that were going to kind of soften the look and feel, was going to get the officers more engaged in some educational activities, summer camps in the summer for kids. It just goes on and on, teaching, digital citizenship and kind of the online, keeping kids safe from being sexually exploited online. All of that stuff was in the works before we kind of headed down this path. So we're going to try and play a little bit of catch up and do some education, and then we'll just really look to the 4J board to kind of give us a sense of where we're at. But we're ready to start moving that direction just as soon as we feel like we've been given permission to do that.
V?
Yes, hi, Chief. When you said earlier, I'm trying to understand, you said earlier that clearing the camps were initiated by the park and open space. And so my question is why, and perhaps you can explain this, why were the police officers there from EPD? Were they there for a certain reason, concerns, or what with the clearing of the camps?
Right. Well, if we're talking about the camp on 13th and 14th in Chambers, which is I think our most recent one. Now let me back up just a little bit. Parks and Open Space has been trying to prioritize which spaces they're paying attention to. And when we talked about coming out of the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and kind of this reopening of our community, which looks like is not going as well as we had hoped, certainly, but reopening this community, one of the things is Parks and Open Space really kind of drove the priority of what we are paying attention to. And parks was one of those. And I think if I remember correctly, it was kind of parks and our riverbanks and some of those really vulnerable spots were important. We were getting a lot of complaints from people that were not comfortable using the parks in their communities because of the camping that was occurring and some of the collateral issues that go along with the camping. So Parks and Open Space kind of took the lead on which ones we were taking a look at first. Lieutenant Doug Mozan is going to actually come on and talk a little bit about the camping rollout as I see it on the agenda. And he's really going to be able to speak to the details of when officers are involved and when they're not, and this kind of strange transition that we're in right now where EPD was kind of the only face of this, and now we're really trying to pull back, but we keep getting drawn into it a little bit, and we're really trying to find a different solution for this. I'm a big proponent actually of taking a look at ways that we build a more robust homeless outreach team to be going to all of these sites instead of police officers to try and get people relocated. And as always, from the day that I got here, I've been beating this drum is that inventory for emergency shelter is kind of the cornerstone of where we need to really kind of build this foundation. And we keep pushing for that as well. But the 13th and 14th Street in Chambers, my understanding was, and I got a text message and I actually inserted myself and asked us to pull back from there because it didn't look and feel as soft as we were hoping to have, or the soft texture we were hoping to have. Is my understanding is we had 2, 3, maybe more campers that were refusing to leave and being a little bit argumentative. And so Parks and Open Space isn't really equipped to deal with people that are being a little bit more aggressive in that respect or being that resistant. And so I think that's probably why we're here. But Lieutenant Mozan will be able to probably really give you some good data on that.
Sweet.
Sean, did you see the message from Jennifer?
No.
She's blocked out, thinks she's gotten shifted over to attendees because she's got some technical difficulties. So
thank you. I will
somebody can look into
find
that.
her and get her back in here.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Terry. I assume that also means Jennifer also has something else she wants to ask. Okay. All right. So we'll move on next to our emergent issues work plan. Part of the thought behind this is that we're getting 4 new commissioners, and I want to make sure that we take these first steps and lay out a game plan, at least for the first steps, about how we will be looking at these policies. It's on page 21 of the agenda. And then any other issues that we can foresee right now that I should put on a future agenda, including, I know we've gotten requests for hiring and demographic breakdowns of EPD, as well as looking at budgetary issues and EPD budgets. I've also heard questions about whether the police commission has a role in the contract negotiations. So I wanted to gather folks' thoughts. Reading over the agenda summary, these are the, and Kyle can speak more to this as well, these are the sort of 5 first policies that sort of go into last month's events and the Civilian Review Board's community impact study in a very obvious way. So we will be reviewing these, I think the aim is in September, as well as having, police input. I don't remember the officer in charge of this, if Jeremy can help me out, but having them in to talk about how these have actually been used now that they've actually been used.
Sorry, Sean, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, do we know which sergeant or officer will be speaking with us on these policies, or will it just be Kyle?
It's just Kyle tonight. Yeah.
Not tonight, for the future.
Oh, well,
for the 5 policies.
that'll vary depending. So we're looking into getting some special experts if possible, but it'll vary on what order and who does. So.
Sweet. So is there any questions or concerns about these policies or about other things that we need to come up? Lindsay?
It seemed when I looked through these policies, it went from 316 to 318, and it seems like policy 317, the one that defines what a civil disturbance is, would be sort of part of that line of thinking. So if we can add 317, I think that would be helpful. I think that's also kind of a point of contention between community and police potentially, is their definitions or definitional understandings of when something changes or becomes a civil disturbance, and then other types of force become allowable.
Yeah. We do have 317 on the list, but we probably forgot it from somewhere in the packet. So I'll have to skim through there as well. Bill, was that you raising your hand or adjusting your collar? Okay. Anybody else have any comments about next steps after this, or do we want to just wait for the new commissioners to come on board as well? Jennifer?
Yeah, I think it might be nice to not start without them because there's so many people being onboarded, and it just seems like it makes more sense to wait.
Okay.
Do you, Sean, I assume you know which meeting that would be there first?
So I believe because they should hopefully be appointed by the end of this month, then we have August off. So that would make September their first meeting. Yeah. And then I've also got on the list of things that we need to look at soon, the sort of current demographics of EPD, the hiring, like the demographics of applications, as well as the sort of advertising behind it. Because if we are, this is my personal bailiwick, is targeting ads and getting what results we want out of that. But are we making the effort to recruit diversity?
I did a cram session of policy research on these because I thought we were going to be looking at stuff today, but
I'm so sorry.
Come back to it.
It is not lost. It just means you're ahead of the curve.
Maybe not lost for you, but it would be for me. I'll have to come back.
All right, so we're actually way ahead of schedule. Next up, we've got this one will probably take a while. The Prohibited Camping Reinforcement Rollout. Welcome, Lieutenant Mozan.
Let's see if I can get myself unmuted here. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Awesome. So I thought I'd keep it a little bit informal, but forgive me. That was my timer that it's time to get on this call. So basically, here's where we're at. So as you all know, or as you may know, the decision to suspend enforcement of prohibited camping came with the onslaught of COVID-19 restrictions the first time. And we looked at CDC guidance and guidance from our 2 emergency operations centers at the city and the county respectively. And all of the guidance was pointing toward leaving people to shelter in place wherever it is they were. And in most cases, they were not in city parks. They were generally in public rights of way, but in a couple of cases, they were in city parks. What we noticed over a little bit of time was that a couple of the sites where people were congregated became so entrenched and so built up quickly that they became health hazards. They gathered all the usual things that we see at large scale camps, such as garbage, debris, human waste, needles, bike parts, and the like. And in a couple of cases, we were asked to close those sites by Public Works based on complaints coming from the neighboring businesses and area residents. Now, understand that when these kinds of complaints come in, we didn't move at anything but a snail's pace, because we were trying to send outreach workers and social services upstream of police to see if we could mitigate some of these problems without having to get involved in enforcement. And in the case of 7th and Garfield, that was not successful, and we weren't able to affect any real change that way. In fact, Chief Skinner, he asked that we send a dumpster over to one of the sites at 7 and Garfield to try to mitigate some of the extra garbage that was there, and it backfired on us. I mean, what we had was a neighborhood full of people who said, "Oh, well, look, a free dumpster," and they put a lot of items in that bin, and then some of the campers then began to scavenge from those items and add it to their campsite. So it was really a bit of a neighborhood mess. Understand that there were a couple of things also working against us at the same time, as if the world were conspiring. We had a CDC guideline to the St. Vincent de Paul folks at dusk to dawn to reduce their shelter size by as much as half or more. The Eugene Mission also reducing their census by a lot to try to accommodate social distancing. And even though we were standing at the shelter for some of the overflow at the Lane County Fairgrounds, it wasn't enough. I mean, we don't have enough in the system right now, and we didn't enough. We had even less at that time. So we were put in a little bit of a tough spot. So after several weeks of attempts to get some compliance, the city, decided to close the site through the guidance of the Public Works Department. And understand that Public Works is divided into a couple of different silos. One of them are Public Works Maintenance. They're the people that clean the streets and they maintain all the gutters and the roadways. Surface Operations. And then the other silo is Public Works Parks and Open Spaces. So Parks and Open Spaces, they deal with all the greenways, all the grassy median strips that you see in between the lanes of travel in various places. They keep all the flowers fresh. And they mow all the parks. So these are two crews that work similarly but different in the sense that each of them has their own chain of command, and EPD has a good relationship with both of them because we work in concert, particularly around issues from the unhoused. So 7th and Garfield was a POS project, a Parks and Open Space project. They secured their closure order, and then they asked us to enforce the order. And the reason why police come to these campsites is because when the complaints get to a place where the city has to administratively close a site, the only people that can actually enforce that closure are the police. So officers went upstream and told people that the site was going to be closing. They posted it. They gave a couple of days notice. And then eventually they went in there to effect the change and to move people out. And as I understand it, the first time we didn't have to take any enforcement at 7 and Garfield, though there was some public backlash from that. So the majority of those campers moved on to the Big Y, or where 6th and 7th split into Highway 99. We call it the Y for that reason. And those campers were by and large pretty socially distant. It was a pretty cool setup at first. And then as things started to reach critical mass, we noticed a real uptick in criminal activity that was fairly untenable for the businesses around there, including a burglary of Coastal Farm and some other pretty significant crime. So the decision was made to administratively close that site, again, due to complaints from neighbors, businesses, and other pressure. So to be consistent, the police aren't proactively doing anything about homeless camping. They weren't then, and they aren't now. So now as we're moving forward, we're in phase 2, sort of phase 2, even though we're slipping backwards. we have the same restrictions from the CDC on our shelter sites. So Dusk to Dawn still has limited beds. The Mission still has limited capacity. The fairground site is closed, and the city sites that we had set up are generally reduced, even though we're opening up new microsites with the help of the good folks in the CMO's office, who are my heroes right now. So our outreach teams that we had set up at the EOC are disbanded, so they're not doing outreach, and we're in a slightly different response profile than we were before. So as complaints come in about sites as they become entrenched, such as 13 and 14 in Chambers, Westmoreland Park, First and Jefferson, you're going to see more, and Washington Jefferson Park in zones 2 and 3, where you saw down by Fifth Avenue a lot of tents. You're going to see the police getting involved in some of those cases because we're the only ones that can actually enforce. So let me see if I can break this out a little bit. Parks enforcement generally happens with the guidance of our 2 park resource officers, and you know that they became part of that large park bond that passed a year ago, or 2 years ago rather. And the park resource officers work in concert with the illicit activities team of Parks and Open Spaces to address camping complaints here and there. So in Westmoreland Park, we had this situation that was running along. We had interested parties from the city that were trying to do outreach, and including myself, to try to mitigate camper behaviors that would draw a closure. We had community activists. There's a group called House Everyone. It's kind of a loose grassroots a collection of people. And then you had some organizations like community supported shelters that were putting things like dumpsters and porta potties out there on their own. We were all trying to kind of keep things going, but there was a fever pitch of neighborhood complaints and a fairly organized grassroots campaign by the Jefferson Westside neighborhood to dismantle that camp. So when phase 2 arrived, there was a lot of pressure on the Parks Department to close that site, and they asked us to enforce park rules, which essentially means no camping in the parks. Earlier than that, Jefferson Westside neighborhood made a fairly organized effort to close or to curtail camping in neighborhood parks, which was Monroe Street Park in that case. So we had carved out an exclusion for neighborhood parks inside of the COVID-19 permissions, if you will. So Westmoreland Park was not a neighborhood park, but it was considered it was definitely time to close it in the wisdom of the Parks Director, and so we were the enforcement arm of the Parks Department for that closure. A lot of those campers were displaced over to 14th and Chambers, and some along 13th and Chambers. And so that campsite eventually gained enough mass and enough hazard where you had human waste showing up in places like the playground of the daycare across the street, and you had human waste showing up all over the Universalist Unitarian Church. You had fights, you had disorderly conduct, you had physical hazards such as bike frames and needles and things like that all over the place, and a lot of garbage. And so complaints came in at such volume that finally it was time to assess that for closure. And so the way that worked was our surface operations team from Public Works, I mentioned them earlier, they went out, took pictures, looked at the site, assessed whether the conditions were consistent with a campsite that they would want to close. They consulted with the city attorney, as we always do in these cases. We tried to coordinate some outreach through Cahoots and through our crisis outreach response team, COURT. These are people that normally only operate downtown, but as I understand it, they made a special gig and went over to this group to talk to them. And then on July 2nd, they posted that site with notice that on July 7th, the site would close, which is this last Tuesday. So normally this would be under my watch. I happened to be off on vacation with my family at that time, but I was monitoring it through my sergeants who were working on the problem. So they posted it without a whole lot of drama on the 2nd, and then there was repeated outreach in between the 2nd and the 7th by our sergeants to try to notice the campers. Hey, look, this is coming. This is going to close, as well as some communication with community activists. Unfortunately, on the 7th, on the morning of the 7th, there wasn't a lot of movement. In fact, there were people having warming fires or cooking fires that morning even. And when it was time to close, the officers showed up and explained to the campers, hey, the gig is up, as we've told you earlier. And for the most part, people started moving, but they were moving slowly. A couple of activists showed up, and no force was necessary to get them out of the way and allow them to have their free speech and yet allow the cleanup operation to continue. And as I understand it, one fellow was cited when he refused to leave an area that was now closed and considered trespassing. And one woman was about to be cited or arrested, but she was convinced to go with cahoots. Everything looked great. She and her things were inside the cahoots van, and I guess something went sideways, and the cahoots folks called us and asked for officers to intervene because her behavior was beyond what they could handle. So at that point, an arrest was made, and she was taken from the site. Understand that a lot of the people we're dealing with in these campsites suffer from some significant mental illness. Many of them have untreated substance abuse disorder and a lot of other comorbid things going on that made them homeless in the first place. And what we'd ideally like to see is them housed or given some temporary place where they can stay. But when their behavior gets to a place where the neighbors are calling us and where the businesses are calling us and where the mayor and council's emails are getting inundated with requests to make some change, that's when the wheels start turning to look at a campsite closure. So moving forward, we're still going to be in the same response profile we were before all this COVID stuff started, in that we're not out hunting for campers to cite and displace. That's not what EPD is about. We don't have time for that. We will, on the other hand, have to respond to complaints about established campsites when they're on public land, and when they're on private land and trespassing. That's kind of a no-brainer. That's an easy one. But you're going to see continued enforcement of park rules and of public spaces where there are complaints and where there's a problem. And I can tell you that the First and Jefferson is the next one on the radar I can see. As well as you've heard of the Washington Jefferson Park cleanup. There was a lot of complaints about that as well. So it's possibly the most or the least glamorous thing the police do, and it's a business that we want to get out of. Frankly, it's not a problem that we had anything to do with creating. And it's not a criminal problem for the most part in terms of the status of homelessness. It's the behaviors that sometimes accompany people who are unhoused, who are living outside, and who have untreated mental illness, untreated substance abuse disorder, and other comorbid factors going on, such as vulnerability to crime themselves or predation by other unhoused folks. There's all kinds of things happening out there. It become the wild, wild west, and then the cops get involved. But it's not where we want to be. I mean, ideally, we would have some other solution where we could sidestep the need for police enforcement, because it's really not what you want your cops to be doing on a day-to-day basis in an ideal world. But understand that if you want to force somebody to leave an area, you got to have somebody who's got some authority. So we've tried to negotiate people leaving. We try to cajole people leaving. We offer all kinds of carrots whenever possible. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. But if we don't have places for people to be, then that's a one key missing component. I should tell you that on the day that 13th and 14th and Chambers were clear, 11 beds were available at the Dusk to Dawn shelter, and that fact was made known to the campers at that site at that time. I don't know if any availed themselves to those beds.
Well, thank you so much, Lieutenant Mozan. Do we have any questions, comments from, all right, we got
Silver,
Silver.
go ahead. Go ahead, Silver.
Yeah, hey, hello. So if that's not what we want to be doing, why don't we just stop? I know it sounds simple, but it's not it feels like right now when COVID cases are on the rise again and we're, like you said, we're in phase 2, but it feels like we should be back in phase 1.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody in these stores really, there's a lot of conversation about people not being compliant with wearing masks in the stores. It feels like a really bad situation to put these people into the place where they are going to be on the move again, or just not having any security. What happened to the camps that we had? We had the setups right here at Amazon Park and at different places.
Well,
maybe that was a funding issue, but
I think it was a funding issue, Silver, and I unfortunately I'm not well versed enough in that particular node to answer it well. Lindsay may know something about it, but I can tell you for sure that we can't just simply stop in the sense that the complaints will come in, and some of the behaviors that drive those complaints become untenable at some point. When people become so entrenched that they've taken over a neighborhood or they've taken over an area. So I agree with you that it would be nice to push pause, and yet we've got to figure out a way to establish some modicum of exceptional or of acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior among those who are in-house, so that we can avoid some of the need for police intervention.
So is the concern in these neighborhoods where it might be an upper, scale neighborhood and people are complaining that there are people that are camping on their sidewalks, or is there a place where we could say the camps can be established, if only for a brief period of time? And
that's an awesome question for the policymakers.
So,
sure.
Is it just that these camps are being set up in, nicer areas where people are complaining?
Well, I don't know what your definition of nicer areas is. Our complaints generally are coming from Whitaker, and they're coming from Jefferson West Side, from friendly area neighbors, from the industrial corridor along 99 near Roosevelt, we get complaints about campers at Four Corners. We get complaints about campers down near West 11th and 18th. So, all nice places. I don't think there's any part of Eugene that isn't nice, and yet I'm not sure that what you're getting at is tracking with what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you said that people are complaining.
So I've got myself on the queue next.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Silver.
You had said that people are complaining about, some of the waste and some of the behaviors and stuff like that. And to me, it just feels like we're allowing for the people who like to complain about these situations to be the ones who are having more of a voice. When I know myself personally, I see somebody who's homeless, if I'm able, I will help them with a hamburger or something like that when I'm able. But I also know that there are a lot of people in this community that complain about homeless issues, and they immediately jump to get a job, get off the streets, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not the case right now. There are so many people out of work because of the COVID situation. So I think we need to look at this situation with a compassionate lens. and really consider what we're doing to these, the least of our brethren, I would say.
Yeah, I agree, Silver. Go ahead, Sean.
So sort of on the same theme, but do we have any guidance on the quantity or substance of complaints which warrants that initial outreach by the, I think you called it the surface operations team?
Yeah, sure. Examples of things that will draw a response from the surface operations team. We call them the SWIM team, the surface wastewater maintenance team. The surface ops or parks and open spaces are garbage, hazards like human waste, urine and feces, things like amassing of debris, pallets, bike parts, propane cans, that sort of thing. The impact to waterways, when we see repeated disorderly behavior, when we see complaints about, excuse me, my dogs have come in, so you're hearing their tails here. So, all right. So complaints about disorderly behavior, about fighting, about noise after hours, complaints about damage to vegetation or impeding of roadways. Sometimes we have tents set up in the street that aren't actually, streets for cars. So these are the kinds of things that they'll respond to. And when they get there, sometimes we can mitigate these things with a quick cleaning or with a posted notice. And sometimes we can get a little bit of compliance from people to move to a different spot or to rein it in. But many times, folks are not ready to move. Either they're not able to due to limited limited organization skills, or they're not willing to because they don't have a place to go.
I live in the university. I live in the university area, and it sounds, everything you're saying, it sounds like a kegger at one of the frat parties or the frat houses. I see that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, Silver. The difference is that a bunch of red cups looks a little different than a bunch of dismantled bikes and poop on people's doorsteps. So
I get it.
I totally track with you. I work that area extensively, and as far as the after hours disorder, it's perfectly on par. It's the ongoing everyday piece that the kegger happens once a week, and this thing goes on sometimes 4 weeks, several weeks. A good example, if you want to see this in action, go to First and Jefferson and drive by there, or go to River Road and Beltline. We had a lot of complaints from neighbors in the River Road corridor about campers that were set up underneath the Beltline on both sides of River Road. We had to clear that out because of the hazards to people walking through that area. Right now, there is in the ODOT right-of-way quite a number of campsites established, both on the south side of Beltline near Carl's Jr. and on the north side of Beltline, spanning from River Road to the west. Now, those aren't areas that we've gone in and done any enforcement with, but we are getting complaints about those areas. And when you look at those conditions, they are textbook examples of what I'm talking about that draw public works closure. They're excellent visual reminders of the condition of human suffering that exists.
So I've got another question. You mentioned that the court expansion, and if anybody else has another question, just wave. So I've got Alan after me, and then Lindsay. You mentioned that the court sort of went outside of their normal operating parameters. Would you say that was successful? And yeah.
No, I would say it was a good effort, and I think it's necessary for us to do some sort of social service outreach. We always make referrals before we take camping enforcement or before we contemplate closures. But I like it better when we actually send social servants like Cahoot's staff out to assess the needs of people who are living on the streets or unhoused. it's crucial. And frankly, we need a homeless outreach team like many communities have. And I know that that's being contemplated and worked on in the city manager's office. And I'm part of the homeless operations team where we're talking about those efforts. But we lack some of the infrastructure that a homeless outreach team normally leverages. So places like Anaheim, California have a very, very good multimodal social service model where the police are about at step 5 in the process, where they've already done outreach and they've established relationships, because you can't, this isn't a one and done thing. This isn't a population where you can just go in and say, hey, how's it going? I'm Bill. Would you like a hamburger? I've got a place for you to stay. I mean, you've got to build trust with people, and you got to spend some time getting to know them before they're going to trust you, particularly if you're in government. And so the case management is the secret sauce of those successful models. And we're lacking that right now. I mean, Cahoots are phenomenal, outstanding people who do amazing things for the police department, but they're not in a position where they case manage because they're in emergency response mode and constantly having to triage call to call, just like we are.
Anaheim also has Disneyland money, so.
Well, they do. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Anaheim has a phenomenal tax base and resource that it looks a little different than Eugene. It's true.
Mickey's not going to be sending police officers.
They also have the Angels.
Yeah, I've got you on the queue, Alan, and then Lindsay. Alan, if you want to unmute, it's your turn.
Thanks. I've been doing this for a while, and there's just a ton of people that say, why don't you just solve the homeless problem? And I say, okay, the homelessness, though, is not the problem. The homelessness is the symptom. The problem and the causes of homelessness are complete lack of any mental health system in the United States and in Oregon and in Eugene, which the city doesn't have much control over, and drug addiction, and access to facilities and assistance. And by the way, Oregon is 50th out of 50 states in access to drug addiction programs. And the city doesn't have much control over that either. And then the third one is affordable housing. And that is something that's been baking for 30, 40 years, that we don't have affordable housing in this community. So solving homelessness means you have to solve mental health crisis, the drug addiction crisis, and the affordable housing crisis. Then homelessness goes away for a large part, I believe. So I think it's easy to say we need some place to put them. And having dealt with this for years and years, it's extremely difficult to do. And we are so far ahead of most cities in what we've been doing to house the unhoused, and yet it only is a drop in the bucket. And with regard to parks, the parks are not campgrounds. They're actually fairly sensitive ecosystems that take an enormous amount of maintenance, and having a really intensive use like camping on it actually ruins, if you did it over a period of time, would ruin the park, and it would be extremely costly to reconstitute that and repair it. And so, there are no simple answers to this stuff, and that's why we all struggle with it. It's a world-class hard problem, and it's very difficult. Lieutenant Mosin, I was and Chief. We do give 24-hour notice for. We've never used dogs. We don't arrest anybody if we don't have to. And leading by parks and open space are all the things that a lot of people have actually been calling for. The council's to date has not been is unanimous in not getting rid of the camping ban, and I think that probably will stay for the foreseeable future. But Lieutenant Mosin, I have a question about arrests and citations. So when we do, there's a lot of what's the status of that when we go in and people who are camping illegally, what happens? Do they get arrested and put into jail? Do they get citations, and the citations they can't pay, so they just rack up? Maybe you could fill that piece of the pie in.
That's a great question, Alan. Thank you. So the reality is that prohibited camping in the city of Eugene is a violation level offense. That means that nobody can go to jail for prohibited camping under any circumstance. And,
it's like a traffic violation.
It is like a traffic violation. And there was a time in our history when we were citing people for prohibited camping, and when they would no-show to court, the court would issue a failure to appear citation or a failure to appear charge, which was then arrestable, and people would subsequently be arrested on a warrant around their violation level prohibited camping, okay? So based on a series of things, including a huge court backlog at the municipal court, we all put our heads together and tried to figure out how we could mitigate some of those backlogs. And the decision was made to send almost all violations to collections rather than to issue a failure to appear for a no-show. The second and third order effect of that is that someone who receives a camping ticket may have bad credit, but there's no real stick on the other end of non-compliance. So you receive a ticket, you don't leave, you don't show up to court, you're not going anywhere. That's that. You can receive repeated tickets. I mean, and we saw some of our activist campers where they were deliberately camping in public spaces. We were getting dozens of complaints, and as a result, we were taking enforcement action in the form of these prohibited camping citations. But the citations were always, more symbolic than anything else, until we got to the point where there was a forced closure of that site. And usually that was because of all of the conditions I mentioned earlier. And so Public Works comes in then and they say, okay, King's X, things are at a place where we have to bring in a cleaning crew and a dumpster and sometimes special equipment, and sometimes hazmat crews, and we're going to declare this closed. We post it, we give notice, and then we come in. So at that point, Alan, if somebody is refusing to leave that area that is closed, they can be subject to trespass charges. And that's a crime, and people have been arrested for that. In parks, park rules is not a violation, it's a crime. So if you light a fire in a park, or if you are camping in a park, if you are bringing glass bottles into a park, or using drugs, any number of other shooting off fireworks, you're violating park rules and you can be arrested for a park rules violation. It's just like if you're there after 11 o'clock at night and before 6 in the morning during the closed hours, you can be arrested. So, so we do see people occasionally arrested, but more often than not, they're given a ticket for a misdemeanor charge for which they could be arrested. And in at least one case, during the closure of 13 and 14 in Chambers, the trespass charge was levied in the form of a citation rather than a physical arrest. It was the out of control woman who was having difficulty with mental illness and behavior that was physically arrested, as much for her safety as anything else.
I've got Lindsay on the queue next. I'm sorry I didn't see your message before. And then myself again.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hey, no problem, Sean. It's a lot to keep track of. So really, I appreciate, Silver, what you're saying, and I also empathize. I also appreciate what Councilor Zelenka is saying, in that we need to continue to turn our eyes upstream. Whether we're talking about cahoots or whether we're talking about police response, those are crisis response. And obviously the other part of the work that needs to be done is to move upstream and create less crisis. And that's no small task. That's a super complicated thing for all the reasons that Councilor Zelenka delineated. And there are so many components of that system that are outside of our control. So things, like, mental health funding and that type of thing, decreases in HUD funding over the years to go into our programs. But there are things that are within our control that that people have been working diligently on for a long time, and that I want to just encourage us to continue to move forward with. So no barrier shelter is like a critical component of our infrastructure that we just simply don't really have. And I know that's something that we've been working on, and I'm really looking forward to some concrete and specific movement on something like a no barrier shelter. Other things that strike me as within our control is how we choose to spend our money. And I continue to look at the public safety initiative and look at the allocation of dollars and wonder, is 7 cents out of that dollar for homelessness the right balance? And I don't have an answer. And there's a lot of people who've analyzed this in a lot of different ways, but that is within our control. That's a tax we levy here. And that's something that we have within our jurisdiction to decide how we're going to utilize those funds. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I think that's all I'll say on that for right now, but just that I appreciate that it's really difficult to use crisis response to prevent and fix crisis, right? It just kind of contains, but it can't really redeem. It can't really get us to healthy. It can't really get us to preventing these things from happening. So we have to continue to turn our eyes upstream, which is what I think everybody here is sort of continually committed to doing.
Thank you, Lindsay. So for my own comment, I had a question in regards to, I fully understand the necessity of trust and case management to preventing crises without really solving the problem, but being that first step once we do have more solutions to outboarding folks into these solutions. I'm concerned about, as EPD pulls back, we are only being called when there is force that is necessary. We, as in the Eugene department, I'm not one of that, but EPD is only called when there is a necessity for force. Doesn't that work at cross purposes to building that trust? And I don't know if that's a thing you can answer, Mozan. We might need.
I can speak to it. We're called, understand that EPD's job is not to provide social service and outreach to the homeless population. And so we're not actually, and I told you before, we're not proactively hunting unhoused, or that's a strong word, right? It's not, we're not, this isn't like running radar on the side of the road looking for speeders. We're not actually going out there looking for people who are intense and to write them tickets. We are responding to complaints from the community. So so we're sort of in an untenable place where the only contact we generally have is somewhat negative, and even then, we're not taking enforcement in a vast majority of cases. We're making warnings, we're making social service referrals, we're calling cahoots over, we're sizing things up and kind of seeing what's what. Sometimes we'll run some names and maybe clear some warrants, but for the most part, we're not in a major enforcement situation until absolutely necessary. And like I alluded to, in the vast majority of cases where Public Works comes in to close an area, we get compliance and we don't end up making an arrest. So force is sort of force is a bit of a strong word in the sense that we're not really using force per se, but we are the only one that can lever a problem, or lever a response from people who are doing something against the public will. So force in the physical sense, in the physics sense, rather than in the physical sense, is more apropos. I wish that we had, I guess in a perfect world, we'd have outreach, like Lindsay said, no barrier shelters and low barrier shelters. But those shelters aren't enough. I mean, we can't just say, let's set up our tents right here. We did this in Camp 99. It was a marvelous solution for about a week. And then it devolved into something between Waterworld and Lord of the Flies, because we didn't have, clear, organized management leadership within that thing, and it was too darn big. We need smaller sites that have governance and rules and expectations, even if they're no barrier or low barrier, so that we can have people living in some kind of harmony, whether it's ideal or not. And it's got to have some accommodations made for things like dogs. I mean, there's a lot of folks who are in houses that have dogs. Well, I haven't found a lot of shelters that will allow dogs. That's a problem, that leaves people down by our riverbanks, and they're not doing anything good for the environment where they're at. And yet they don't have a lot of other places to go. Then there's folks with mental illness or substance abuse disorder. You can house them, housing first for sure, but you got to follow it up with some case management and some access to healing and working on some of the things that made them homeless in the first place. There's folks who have sex offender status. Well, where are they going to go? You can't just stick them in with everybody else, or you're going to have potential violations of terms and conditions. So we got to be working with our partners like sponsors to figure out where, how we can manage those cases and get them the treatment they need.
I have one more question before. So if anybody else wave your hand. But so I heard from Alan that we weren't planning on reinforcing the prohibited camping stuff for any time soon. I was wondering if there was more concrete guidelines on what conditions, because I know a couple of public comments had the point of, once there's no new COVID cases.
Just a clarification, Sean, what I said was that it's been a unanimous vote over the last several years that we would not get rid of the camping prohibition. And I don't expect that to change.
Okay. So then, is there any guidance from council or from the department under what conditions we will begin reinforcing the prohibited camping ban?
Well, like I said earlier, in phase 2 and beyond, we will be enforcing prohibited camping and public and park rules in places where we get complaints and where it is necessary to clear campsites. Parks are generally off limits. We're not going to see an acceptable use of parks for camping in any case that I can think of, unless the council or CMO direct it. And so if that happens, then we will work in harmony with that order and make it so. But our parks are an area where we're going to get a lot of pressure to keep people from camping.
Silver, we've got you on the queue.
So if we were back in phase 1, then we wouldn't enforce?
Well, yeah, theoretically, but that's a direction I get from my boss. He's on this call. I can tell you that the way we did it felt right at the time. It didn't quite work out as planned, in the sense that, the idea was social distancing, right? The idea was to keep people apart so that they could reduce the idea of a spread. And what I didn't see was a lot of social distancing. I saw a lot of communities being formed, and then those communities growing and growing. So it's sort of neat to see in the sense that people attract people, but from a disease prevention standpoint, I'm not sure that goal was being realized.
Sweet. If nobody else has any questions or comments, V, and then anybody who wants to make any motions after V.
Lieutenant Mosen, you mentioned that And you brought up a point that I've never considered, that sometimes, you know, when someone who's homeless and they have a canine companion,
Sure.
Which kind of precludes them from, you know, excludes them, I mean, from be able to go into a shelter. And I don't know if you can or can't answer this because you don't work in the shelter, you work with them, but maybe you know whether or not they've considered this. Have they ever talked about maybe putting in a kennel area where, you know, these companion animals can then stay in during the night, you know, separated from the other guests?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the Dusk to Dawn model that is being run by St. Vincent de Paul tried an experiment where they created some microsites, and that was with city funding, where we put some Quonset hut tents up inside the compound of the Dusk to Dawn. And then inside those Quonset huts, we put tents, individual tents, and we allowed some people with dogs to occupy those spaces. And then there were some guidelines about what the dog's behavior expectations were. And in a couple of cases, there were not many problems, and in a couple of cases, there were problems. As I understand it, there were some issues between, you know, dogs getting along with other dogs. But I can't speak intelligently enough to, you know, with enough detail that that St. Vincent could. And I would ask anyone interested in knowing about that to talk to Roxanne O'Brien over at St. Vincent de Paul. She's a wealth of knowledge and a great partner for the city and county in serving the unhoused.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all. Does anybody have any last thoughts before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. Seeing none. What is next? The Canine Program Policy with Sergeant Williams. So this is the one that we reviewed 2 months ago, sent back for final review, had to skip last time, and is coming back today.
Yeah, hey, this is Sergeant Williams. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, perfect. I was in a really windy spot, had to move to a different spot myself.
We are losing you, actually. Can you repeat? And also, Doug, thank you for joining us. You're more than welcome to head out too. Right? Go ahead, Kyle.
Are you able to hear me any better now?
A little bit.
All right. Well, it has mostly been in. I've lost you guys once or twice, but it's come back briefly or pretty quickly. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that'll work. I moved my phone a little bit. So we had 2 requests from the last meeting, and one was to clearly state that training aid narcotics were taken from our evidence control unit, or allowed to be taken from our evidence control unit, and so we added that language. Unfortunately, I had planned on having some notes and my policy in front of me, but my cell signal, even though it has said that I've had signal, has not worked, and so I'm flying a little blind here, and I apologize for that. The other thing that was requested was that we added more robust checks and balances for ensuring that the training aids, essentially drugs from criminal cases that had been adjudicated, where the criminal case was completed and they were to be destroyed, that those would be then used as training aids. And so I highlighted all the language that pertained to that and the changes that were made, and I hope that that's sufficient. Essentially, and I got to be honest, it's been a long time now since I made those adjustments. I believe that we added a monthly audit and a quarterly audit. And the quality assurance analyst is a police employee, but their sole job is to ensure that our evidence control unit and other systems and processes that need checks and balances are that. And so it's she in there currently, and so she ensures that audits like this are completed and is in charge of that as a separate person that's not connected in any one particular unit. And so there's only so many specifics I'm going to be able to go in. If anybody has any questions about those specifically highlighted places, please kick those to me. And let me know if there's any questions I can answer.
Saw Lindsay's hand first, and then Jennifer's, then Alan. Oh, yes, Lindsay, then Alan.
Kyle, thank you. I read through those changes, and all of the concerns that I had have been met by those changes to the policy, both in terms of where the narcotics would be coming from, that being more specific, having an audit process that's outside of the chain of command of the canine officers, and then a more robust kind of oversight system or more frequent auditing. So I appreciate those changes and don't have any further concerns with the policy as it currently is written.
Perfect. Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for bringing those up. They were great comments and concerns, and it's easy for us to overlook those things, which is why we like having you all to do that for us and help bring things to light that we might have missed. So that's perfect, and I like it in the form that it's in as well.
Sweet. Alan?
So, Kyle, you had yellow and green highlighted parts of the text in the packet. The green was the new text, if you recall. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the
the
yellow
yellow
was
is the main portion. Yeah, yellow is the main portion we're talking about, and green had real particular language adjustments.
Yeah, okay. And I also thank Lindsay for bringing up these issues. I think they were good additions, and I can support the new language and that was highlighted in green. I think they were good adds to the policy, made it a lot clearer and a little tighter.
Perfect, thanks.
I've got myself as well, which is, my question is, as per the public comment, are there strong guidelines on when canines will be used for drug detection? Because it seems, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, there's a whole host of training and case law and other rules and regulations that go along with it. Similar to so many things that we do, where there's a lot more to it than what I could really speak to it. And some of that would be a discussion to have probably with that canine officer at some point.
Okay.
And so we don't get to go into significant detail. There's some detail in there about when the dog can and what the goals of the dog are. But the ins and outs of all the details, because it's always evolving, it's very difficult to capture that in policy. And so there's a certain amount that we have to rely on current legal standards, which are constantly evolving. And I am not a dog canine, detection canine or canine expert in any way, shape, or form. And so I don't know that I could answer any great questions for you, although if you have any in particular, we can certainly try to get those answered for you.
No, I think it's enough of an answer to know that it's always evolving and that we need to talk to people who have gone through the training.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So do we have a motion to, Alan?
Sean, yeah, I had another question.
And then Lindsay.
Yeah, I've never thought of you as a canine, Kyle, but I had a question about the policy about reporting. It says, whenever the canine is successfully deployed, a report, blah, blah, blah. So first thing that popped into my head was, well, there's got to be unsuccessful deployments. Why wouldn't those be reported? So I guess the question is, what does that successful deployment mean? Does that mean they caught the bad guy, or that the actual release occurred? Or maybe you can address that.
Yeah, and is that in the general? Forgive me. Is that in the general canine section, or is that it? Okay, yeah. So that's going to be any time that a suspect is located, or any level of a capture or find occurs, because the dogs go out all the time for all kinds of stuff, and they walk a neighborhood and they don't get anything, and then they move on to the next thing. And so we don't report every time that the dog is out of the car, or they're training, or they go on a call and they get nothing because they've stretched the time frame or whatever.
Yeah, because there's
they may keep more stats than that. But we really are, for reporting purposes and for the department, we're really trying to capture when the details of when they found somebody and capturing the times when the dog interacted with the community or with a suspect, et cetera, whether it was a bite or not, because oftentimes they don't bite, they detect and a suspect gives up and we go from there.
Yeah, because the section right before that is guidelines for non-apprehension use, and there's all these different things that that the canines are used for and deployed. So what I think I hear you saying is 904.2.5, reporting canine use, bites, and injuries, is when you're actually deploying them to catch a suspect or search for a suspect, right?
Correct.
Not
yeah. So that would have to do it. Yeah, and that would certainly have to do with the people detection dogs, not the narcotics detection, of course, since they're very, very separate training and separate dogs, and we don't cross train those here. There are some places where they cross train dogs to do both, but that's not here.
Okay. Yeah, that was the one question I had. Thanks.
Sweet. Jeremy, did you have something?
I do. I have an image that Chief would like for me to share. It is our most recent canine just today found 6 pounds of meth, and he thought it was important that people see that image. Are you open to that right now?
Yeah, go ahead and share it.
Please let me know if people are seeing this. Oh,
yep. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at Jack, who is our newest canine partner. He is a drug dog, and the new kid found, as they put it, the caption I got is the new kid on the block found 6 pounds of meth as a result of a search warrant. So this gives you a good sense of what and how special these dogs are to the types of things that we do. And so that's 6 less pounds of methamphetamine that are on our streets.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Well,
I've got Z.
Sergeant Williams, I don't know if you mentioned this before, but I'm wondering why are some of the canines not trained, cross-trained on narcotic detection? And you touch on that a little bit. I don't know if you've talked about that before.
Yeah, I'm not a big time expert in it, but it creates complications in the way the dogs interact with people, and I think it's more challenging to have a dog that knows not to bite when he's just finding drugs, and then does know when to bite when he's biting people. It's less common to have dogs that are cross-trained. Most places it's one or the other because it's a specific job, and then you're relying on the dog to know how to react once it finds what it's looking for. And so it's just complicated, and I think it adds a level of danger and risk, even though it's probably able to be mitigated with proper training and the right dog. I wouldn't say it's just not the industry standard in general to do that.
Sweet. I've got Silver and then myself.
So it seems like everybody in the world, since we have legal marijuana in the state, uses weed in some way. Are the dogs going to be looking for that?
Jack is not trained to detect on marijuana. And I just saw recently, I think it's cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin, I think are the 3 that he's trained to detect. Okay. But don't quote me on that exactly. But I do know that he's not trained to detect marijuana. I don't know that anybody's training dogs to detect marijuana anymore because it is legal, at least here.
Right.
So my question is, we are adding the use of force to firearms, and I know with the historic relationship between police and the use of canines, it probably warranted to include using, at the very least, including use of force reporting when a dog is, depending on the definition of deployed, but even when a dog is brought out, even if the dog does not is not released at any point. Or am I misunderstanding?
Well, if a dog interacts with somebody, with a person, that's going to be considered a successful deployment, and that's going to be reported.
Right.
And that is where it would be, and that is essentially where it is a use of force, where if somebody's behavior is altered because the dog found them, that is considered a capture by dog standards, okay, even though it's not bites, it really is captures, and captures occur with any number of endings. And so that is certainly going to be reported. It's only the times where the dog isn't interacting with anybody where where we may or may not be capturing those statistics depending on the specific incident.
Sweet. Lindsay?
So Sean, is what I'm hearing you say is that you, similar to the reporting of an unholstering of a weapon or unholstering of a taser, if a dog is actively engaging with people, regardless of the outcome, you think that should be reported as a use of force. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, and I think Kyle's answer that even bringing them out is considered the deployment, so that would be covered under the current policy.
So I would say, I mean, if looking at the words 904.2.5, and I know Kyle doesn't have this in front of him, so that's, I'm just going to read it. It says, whenever the canine is successfully deployed, a canine use report will be completed by the handler and entered in the canine database before going off duty. Section B talks about if there's a bite or injury, a use of force report will be completed. So it seems like a simple modification of adding the language, a use of force report will also be completed at a successful deployment, would harmonize what Sean is saying with the policy language. And I don't know if or we should do that now. If I'm understanding you correctly, I think that's how you would modify it.
Lindsay, can you read the title of that second section? Bites, something or other, and something. Can you just read that to me
so
one more time?
It's reporting canine uses, bites, and injuries. It's 904.2.5, and it's sections A and B. So section A talks about successful deployment, and that successful deployment goes in the canine use report in the canine database, whereas a bite or an injury goes in the use of force report. So it seems to me like if section A indicated it should be entered in blue team or whatever, then that would harmonize what Sean is saying with the policy.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Lindsay. As we look to revamp our use of force reporting and build an office of force accountability within professional standards, is that a canine, the presence of a canine, and as loud and as demonstrative as they can be, that we're certainly hoping people will comply with that. But it is definitely a show of ominous force when you have a canine partner doing what they do. So I think we absolutely can move down that path, just so that we're in alignment with all of those things that we're beginning to add to our use of force reporting structure.
Thanks, Chief. I've got Lindsay again.
Yeah, and I was, as I was recollecting how it is written a little bit different than what I was picturing from hearing you through, and I'd agree with the Chief. And I think there's probably going to be, with that, I think there will be some adjustments in how the canines are reporting anyway. And so I think that's an easy adjustment to make, whether it's right now or whether or not we take that advice and review it as part of the bigger picture and then bring you back, let you know when we've made that adjustment as we work through the systems. I do think that's a good call.
Lindsay?
John, I think you sort of alluded to it, but I do think it's important, particularly when you're considering the impact of police and use of force on communities of color, that the dogs particularly are something that are part of our past, right? And so their presence is threatening to people and have been experienced differently by people depending on their color. So thanks for bringing that up, Sean.
So can we get a motion to approve the policy with a couple of those words added in section A?
It needs to be more specific, like exactly what words.
I would say, yeah, Lindsay.
I'll take a stab at it. So I move that we approve the policy with the modification to section 904.2.5, section A, to include a use of force report when a canine is successfully deployed.
You're so good at this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jennifer Ye. Any additional discussion? Everybody in favor?
I have a question. So what's the difference? So how does that differ from what section B does?
Section B is a bite or injury. It's not just, a dog, ours are not trained this way, but a dog barking as they find somebody.
Yeah. So what happens? What this would look like is all of our dogs are online or on lead type work. So back in the day, handlers used to let their dogs kind of off lead to work, and handlers would work behind them. And then what we found was dogs would get to a suspect or find a suspect, and then you better make sure your dog is really, really well trained. Otherwise you have an unintentional bite. Our dogs are on lead. And so many times you have an officer that's got on the lead, finds somebody, the dog goes berserk and starts barking, never bites, never does anything, but finds the person. And then the officer's like, okay, time for you to get on the ground. He's got this big, nasty, gnarling dog, and that show of force is what we're trying to capture here. So that's the majority of our captures are like that. And so I think it is appropriate to do a use of force report when things like that happen, and no bite or injury has occurred at that point.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
You bet.
Sweet. Any additional discussion? Everybody in favor, say aye or wave your hand.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Anybody opposed? All right. So that motion passes, and we are on to the next thing, which is honoring our outgoing members. I believe the chief would like to say a few words, then Lucy Venice. Yes, Kyle.
Hey, I'm having some issues getting pushed into a rocky bank here, so I'm going to get going. If I can just say a quick thank you to the 4 members that are leaving, and I sure have appreciated working with all of you and look forward to interacting offline to kind of express that thank you here in the next couple of weeks as I get back to the office.
Bye, Kyle. Thanks, Kyle. Enjoy your vacation. Thank you for joining us, even though you're on vacation.
Hey, will do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sweet. So I believe, assuming it's okay with both of you, Chief Skinner will speak first, and then Mayor Venice.
Thank you, Sean. I'm gonna have to be off of the video because I've got some things I need to read, and they're in my email, and so I've got them pulled up now. But amidst all of this really hard work and controversial work, it is my pleasure to just extend just the deepest gratitude. And I've only been here for a couple of years, but have enjoyed the last 2 years with these individuals. We'll be honoring Bill Whalen, Edward Gehring, Terry Robertson, and William Davey for their service and leadership to the police commission, this police department, and to the greater community. And so we really thank that. So I have a few things I want to read, and I'm going to go through each one of them. That kind of just gives a sense of who these individuals are and what they've meant to us. And then I think Mayor Vinnis wanted to offer some comments at the end of that, and certainly want to get through this and yield my time to the Honorable Mayor so that she can talk about that. I hear you giggling, by the way. So
it was
Terry
the honorable
Robert,
part.
I'm going to start calling her Your Honor from now on. Terry Robertson, we certainly want to honor you tonight, ma'am. Thank you so much for being a part of our police commission and making us better. Ms. Robertson, your work through the Eugene Police Commission has served the community honorably during the past 5 years. Often the first to volunteer, your dedication and devotion to the police commission has been evident in your cheerful willingness to go above and beyond to participate in police commission interviews, offering to help colleagues when their monthly commute created challenges, and taking an active role in representing the police commission in public outreach, including at the Asian celebration and many neighborhood meetings, including those for Cal Young Neighborhood Association, Jefferson Westside Neighbors, Friendly Area Neighbors, and many more. Your volunteer work with the Eugene Library also provided valuable downtown insight on countless policy reviews and subject matter, including taser deployment, illegal camping, homelessness, camera usage, code of conduct, use of deadly force, and a myriad of other topics. Your leadership and participation has been a great asset and will be missed. Because of the great work that you have accomplished through the Police Commission and for the Eugene Police Department, you are hereby awarded with the Eugene Police Department Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you very much. Next, we want to honor...
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, of course. Next, we want to honor William Davey. Mr. Davey, your work through the Eugene Police Commission for the past 4 years and your continued efforts as a volunteer researcher with the Eugene Police Department for the past 7 years have served the community honorably. You have immersed yourself in more than 500 hours researching on the topics of police legitimacy, community policing, and procedural justice, and even trained with the Metropolitan Explosives Disposal Unit in order to recover their history. Your work with the department and 33 years as a professor of philosophy provided valuable insight on countless policy reviews and subject matter, including taser deployment, illegal camping, homelessness, camera usage, code of conduct, use of deadly force, and a myriad of other topics. Your leadership and participation on the Police Commission has been a great asset and will be missed. Because of the great work that you have accomplished through the Police Commission and for the Eugene Police Department, you are hereby awarded with the Eugene Police Department Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you, William. Edward Gearing, honored. Mr. Gearing, your work through the Eugene Police Commission has served the community honorably during the past 8 years. You served as vice chair in fiscal year 2017. Your additional efforts as liaison provided the commission with valuable awareness into the efforts of the Human Rights Commission. You provided insight on countless policy reviews and subject matter, including taser deployment, illegal camping, homelessness, camera usage, code of conduct, use of deadly force, and a myriad of other topics. In addition, you brought valuable social media skills from your experience with political races, keeping the commission regularly updated on contemporary matters in the news, and sent the Police Commission outreach message to more than 10,000 people at your own personal expense. Your leadership and participation has been a great asset and will be missed. Because of the great work that you have accomplished through the Police Commission and for the Eugene Police Department, you are hereby awarded the Eugene Police Department Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you, Edward. And last but not least, my favorite bow tying wearing friend, Bill Whalen, we're gonna honor you. During the last 8 years, Bill Whalen has served our community and devoted countless hours as a commissioner to the Eugene Police Commission. Through your tireless efforts to better the community, you were elected by your fellow commissioners to lead their efforts as commission chair for 3 years and vice chair for an additional 2. During this time, you led the commission through numerous policy reviews and subject matter, including taser, illegal camping, homelessness, camera usage, code of conduct, use of deadly force, and a myriad of other topics. Additionally, you were instrumental in the creation of the Eugene Police Foundation, whose charity has allowed Eugene Police to help host Shop with a Cop, purchase a canine, keep temporary shelter over families in need, and countless other gracious acts. Finishing your time as chair, you joined the efforts on the community safety revenue team and established a funding source to match our city's growth with the policing resources they need. Your leadership, guidance, and participation have been a great asset and will be surely missed. Because of the great work that you have accomplished through the Police Commission and for the Eugene Police Department, you are hereby awarded the Eugene Police Department Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you, Bill. I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Venus and continuing to congratulate and honor these 4 former commissioners.
Thank you so very much, Chief. I am really honored to have an opportunity to thank these 4 very committed members of our community, William, Terry, Edward, and Bill. Thank you so much. I wanted to follow the Chief because I wanted to have the last word. And the last word is thank you. We are in your debt. There are 2 of you I know well. Bill, I believe we met early on when I was first elected mayor and sat down with you and you talked to me about the police commission and how it functions. And so I've been grateful to you ever since for setting me on the right path in terms of understanding the important work that this commission does. And Edward, I have benefited for all through my first term and before I was elected from your skill, your knowledge, your incredible background about public safety and how to reach out to the community and communicate. Terry and William, I haven't had the chance to work as closely with either one of you, but I have certainly impressed and grateful to you for your many years of service. And I want to thank you for topping this all off after many years of really bringing our community into the place it needs to be now to face the new efforts that we have to revise how we look at our public safety, to be inclusive, and your graciousness last month of staying with us a little bit longer so that we would have the opportunity to open up this commission to a robust roster of applications of people from all over the community who are very eager to follow in your footsteps. So thank you for creating that pathway, showing people how to do this work with integrity and commitment and perseverance and intelligence. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you again for all you have done. And we're in better shape because of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
You're on mute, Sean.
Thank you so much. We'll move into commissioner comments, closing comments. And I will kick it off just by saying that I have benefited immensely from all of your participation. Obviously, I've worked with each of you, maybe not as long as I would have liked, but thank you nonetheless. Next up, we will have Matt and then Terry.
I echo the support for the outgoing commissioners. Thank you. Thanks for leading the way, showing new people good practices and integrity. I like that word, integrity. So thank you. Best of luck to you in the future.
Terry and then Lindsay.
I'll just say thank you. It's been a pleasure to serve my community in this way. And I feel like even in these challenging times, we're doing a lot of things that are working. And let's just keep moving on with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Lindsay and then Jennifer.
It's been a pleasure to work with the 4 of you who are leaving. Bill, I look forward to working with you as you continue on in the CRB. Edward, we go way back to when you were on the Human Rights Commission and I was the staff member. So it's good to see you again and to see you on your final meeting. Just thank you all for your participation. I'm glad that we're here to do this work. One final detail of something that I appreciated when I was reading through the minutes is that all the public comments were transcribed. And I know that sounds like a small thing, but sometimes you speak something out into a public comment and then it just kind of disappears, but it's in the written minutes, which is something that lasts in a different kind of way. So I appreciate that staff took the time to transcribe those comments and memorialize them in that way. It might seem like a small thing, but it was meaningful to me, so thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Jennifer, and then Bill.
So also, yes, I want to echo, thank you so much, the four of you, for just your professionalism and your honesty and your welcoming when I came on as well. I know we're going to get great new candidates, but it's also going to feel a little weird to have you not at the table. And I look forward to whatever you guys decide to do next, because I'm sure this isn't the end. I know Bill's moving on to another commission, but I'm sure we'll see the rest of you doing other things as well. So.
Bill, and then Will.
So I just appreciate all the nice words from everybody. It has been great. Edward and I go back all the way to the beginning, I think, of this 8 years ago. But I just want to tell you to continue the good work. Eugene has always been ahead of the curve in how it polices its community, and we need to stay that way. And I think this is a time that we could really work on some police reforms that can be a model for the rest of the country to look at, similar as our Cahoots has now got the national news. It's interesting. My family still lives in Southern California, my brothers and my parents, and all of them have called me and talked to me about the Cahoots as it's gone national news, and asked how we started that and if that's going to be a national model. So very proud to have those things happen here. So good job, everyone, and keep up the work.
Thanks, Bill. Will, and then V.
Hey, I have found this interesting, and that's important to me. I like being interested. And I think the next 4 years are going to be interesting as well. I'm actually pretty optimistic about the future well-being of the Eugene Police Department. I think we're on a good trajectory, and I think the department will weather the changes to come and the refinements to come and come out in much better shape than it is now. So optimistic. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. V, and then Alan.
Well, this is kind of sad for me, and happy, because I'm happy that you're moving on to something, a new adventure. But of course, I will certainly miss seeing you, at the meeting or here on Zoom. I remember, Bill, you were at the orientation for me when I was joining the commission. And you've certainly helped me understand how the meetings are run and policies and things like that. So I've learned a lot from you. So thank you so much. Terry and Ed, I remember meeting you outside of the conference room before my very first meeting on the commission. You're both transplants from the Bay Area, SF Bay Area. So I made that connection, and that kind of helped me a lot as far as, going into the room with all the strangers, that I've never met before. And so it really, your meeting you definitely has helped me a lot in feeling more comfortable and getting into the room and joining a whole group of people, so thank you for that. So Will, I didn't get to know you much, but I remember watching the videos before even applying for the commission, and I've always, enjoyed hearing you speak. You bring a lot of wisdom to the table. A lot of when you speak, I gravitate to the video and just wanted to hear every word that comes out of your mouth. So I hope that one day I aspire to have your level of public speaking ability, and I don't know if that will ever be, but anyway, I have something to strive for. Yeah, and that's you. Okay, thank you so much. Good luck to all of you.
Alan and then Silver.
Yeah, I'll add my thanks to what the chief and the mayor said and everybody else. It's puzzling to me just when we're starting to get interesting, you four are leaving. I mean, jeez. I hope you'll watch and participate and call in or video into our meetings. But I'm fairly new to the commission, but I just wanted to say to all four of you that you showed me what a police commissioner is supposed to be and how to act, in that you were all very level-headed, you were very hardworking, and you served with a lot of integrity. So you set up a model for everybody that's to come about how to do this. So thank you very much, and for your service to the community. I'll see you around.
Thanks, Alan. Silver and then Edward.
So Will had I had the pleasure of having lunch with Will, Carter, Pete Kearns, and my son at a restaurant on the river. And I just remember thinking, not really sure what's going to take place here. I don't know what you were thinking at the time, Will, but it was, we just wasn't sure what was going to be taking place over the next few years. And so I am going to miss all of you. I appreciate the time that we had together on this commission. I love hearing your stories, Terry, about Hollywood. And I'm sure Ed and I can talk more about Port Townsend offline at some point. But you know, all the history there. You're gone but not forgotten, and you can know that in my heart, I'm retiring your jerseys. That's it.
Thanks, Silver. Edward.
Wow, my jersey retired. I didn't think I would live to see that day. I'm going to miss working with all of you. I could get a little teary-eyed about it. It's been a great experience. I'm deeply impressed with how the department is rising to the challenge of the changes across the country right now. And I don't doubt that the commission that I leave behind is rising to that as well. I do feel on the way out the door, I possibly owe you an apology. That final total of people reached with the PSA about openings on the police commission was 21,000. Sorry. I know that makes a lot more interviews for you, but I think out of the pool that you have, you're going to find some excellent candidates. And I really look forward to seeing how that blend works out. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to serve with you.
Thank you, Edward. On that note, I will actually, to inform folks of what's going on in the subcommittee, I should have had this as an agenda item perhaps, but we set sort of the guidelines on Monday. We will be choosing folks to interview. The interviews will not be made public so that folks who might be wary of having their personal information up on the internet forever, that sort of privacy. But the final discussion will be will be a public meeting coming not next week, but the week after. So over the next week, we are going to try to interview as many people as possible, with maybe a few interviews rolling over to that Monday or Tuesday, the 20th and 21st. And hopefully, Mayor, you and Council will have our recommendations by that week. But thank you all for coming here today.
How many applicants were there?
So far, there are 85. 60, some of them have been redacted. So I've read through 60, some of them. We've got another 20 that have not yet been redacted. And of course, the final day to apply is tomorrow. So if you are listening and you haven't applied yet, please do before tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful night.
Goodbye, everybody.
See you, Terry. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Okay. Yes, tomorrow, Monday.
Yeah.